Okay, time for my last Wano video. But it's about Hiyori, so yay! As I've stated with this one and with several others, Hiyori is probably my favorite character in Wano, followed probably pretty closely by Hirogoro and then Momonosuke. But and then Kawamatsu gets thrown in there as well because he's my favorite scabbard. Actually Kiku and then Kawamatsu for the scabbard. But time to finish up Hiyori's story. This is kind of the Hiyori's vengeance section. This is her part during Onigashima and then after. So technically where we last left Hiyori is her still up in the Ringo region, having told, you know, Kawamatsu and Zoro that, okay, I'm going to stay here. And you guys go fight Kaido, fight on Onigashima, and I'll be waiting here when you get back. Bold-faced lie. Bold effing faced lie there. Somehow, after they leave, Hiyori makes her way down to the area somewhere, probably getting in contact with Denjiro in all honesty. And he probably sneaks her to Onigashima on one of his ships. Or I guess it's possible by chance she ended up on the same ship that Toko was on, that Tama was on. Toko during all this time frame is with, or at least during the Fire Festival section, she is with Tenguyama. She's with Sukiyake and the Flower Capital. But Hiyori is making her way to Onigashima. She hit on one of the tribute boats that was brought, and she sneaks her way into Onigashima. And she ends up just like kind of hiding out there for a while. And essentially what ends up happening is, so Hiyori ends up, she's kind of aware of all the fighting that's going on, possibly hears bits of the broadcasts that are happening at times. And at one point, she does manage to, after Law teleports all of the injured scabbards into one of the treasure repositories, after their fight with Kaido, she ends up finding them and like tending to their wounds. And then when they all wake up, they're like, okay, what happened? We were very badly injured. Who treated us? And Denjiro probably figures out what happened. And then we don't see, what happened. She, tends to the scabbard's wounds and then dashes off to go hide again. Dashes off to go hide again. During this time frame, like, Kawamatsu kind of wakes up, and he thought, like he mistook her for a dream. It's like, no, this can't be true. Hiyori can't be here. Okay, I'm just hallucinating in pain right now. Pain and blood loss. Fun. So, and like when she was first shown up, all of us, like, because we just got like the silhouette, some of us were like, okay, well, that just has to be Hiyori then, given the silhouette. Or it's like, well, maybe it's actually Toki. And then there was the joke answer that it was Eneru. So we kind of get those answers. And essentially what ends up happening is she ends up making her way back to one of the treasure repositories. Where she's just waiting. She's still dressed as Komurasaki. Or she's once more dressed as Komurasaki, I should say. And she's sitting there playing her shamisen. And the way that we are introduced to confirming that she is on Onigashima is through Orochi's eyes. He's kind of just waiting for Fuku Rokuju, trying to, he set a bunch of stuff on fire, and now he's in the treasure repository waiting for Fuku Rokuju to fight Raizo and lose humiliatingly. And what ends up happening is he hears music, and he like goes over to like one of the doors, and he opens the door, and he sees Komurasaki in all her beauty sitting there alive. And he's like, "Oh, you're alive!" And he's just like so besotted with her again, as is part of the plan. And he just goes over and starts fawning over her, and he's like, "Oh, how are you here?" And she's like, "Oh, I have returned for you." And he like lays down next to her, and he requests her to play his favorite song, which is Moon Princess. While he waits for Fukurokuju. And so she does, and she ends up. So there's a couple of things that happen here. So Hiyori, she puts her kitsune mask back on, which is she always wears whenever she plays that song. And of course, during this section, we find out why she always does that. So she puts the mask on. And then the other thing that she does is, unbeknownst to Orochi, during this time frame, she ends up getting one of the sea stone nails either jabbed into him or at some point in time while he was distracted, she jabs the nail into him, so he can't transform. His devil fruit is nullified, so he can't change into his Yamata no Orochi form. So we go through all of that. At some point in time, the island just begins to shake, and this is when like Kaido has like lifted up the island, and it has been moving and is kind of starting to fall apart, has tremors because of how much damage Kaido is taking up on the roof in his various battles with his various opponents during this time frame. And what ends up happening is Orochi is enraged when he learns that Fukurokuju hasn't shown up yet. And then he gets angry at Hiyori for continuing to play, even though he ordered her to stop, as well as ordering her to remove her mask, doubting that it's actually her. It's just like, why are you, going through all of this? And at that point in time, the ceiling just collapses right on top of Orochi, and he's just trapped under there. And he's wondering why he can't transform, and Hiyori is just very amused by this. Which is just funny. I'm like, yeah, no, I get it, girl. Trust me, I get it. And so we have all of those things lining up. Orochi is now trapped under the rubble. He has a sea prism gnome? Yes, a sea prism gnome. Sea prism nail jabbed into him, so he can't transform, so doesn't have access to his devil fruit powers at the moment. And Hiyori's just sitting there, or Komurasaki is just sitting there playing the shamisen. And, she just leaves him there. He's like, help me, Hiyori. And she's like, nope. She's just like, nope, I'm not going to help you. Why would I help you? And he's like, but we're in love. Nope. And Hiyori gets to go through this great bit where we have, so we have this great bit here where Hiyori finally gets to have her moment of confronting Orochi and fully explain to him who she is and kind of get her vengeance on him for what has happened to her father and her mother and her country and everything else like that. And how much pain that she has been in over these past 20 years. And I really hope she goes to therapy at some point in time. So kind of what ends up happening is Hiyori explains that she managed to immobilize him with the sea stone nail. And he's like, oh, why did you do that? I thought you were in love with me. Why are you doing this? And she's like teasing him. And then she reveals that the song that she's playing, the Moon Princess song, was actually her father's favorite song. And we have the reveal where she explains that the reason she always wears the kitsune mask whenever she plays that specific song, whenever she plays Moon Princess, is because it was her father's favorite song, and it pains her so much to have to play it for Orochi, who's the man who's one of the reasons why her father is dead, that she has to wear the mask because as much as she has this armor built up as Komurasaki, as much as she does this, as much as she is able to toy with not just other men, but Orochi and other people who are just horrible in Wano, the way that she's able to play them like fiddles on it, play them like a harp, or play them like she plays her shamisen. And she goes through all of that. And it's just this whole question that this whole thing where it's like the reason she wears the mask is because she cannot help herself from crying. That is the one time during all of this act in front of him that she cannot keep up completely, and she has to wear the mask to hide the fact that she's crying. And then she'll remove the mask and she's back to being, the happy, flirty Komurasaki. And she removes the mask, and we just see how angry Hiyori is. And she is just like, I am the daughter of Kozuki Oden. I am Kozuki Hiyori. And like has like this speech that she gives to him that she just rightfully is very angry at him about. Which I'm like, yeah, no. You have every right to be mad. My name is Kozuki Hiyori. Watch what you say, you insolent man, for how he is, still treating the memory of Oden. And she is just distraught at this and angry, and she's finally able to let her anger out to the surface, to be like, you are the effing reason that my parents are dead. You are the reason that our country is the way that it is. You invited Kaido here and gave him full reign to do what he wanted. That has led to so much suffering of my people. And I have had to sit and watch for the past 20 years. And I've had to deal with your effing BS all that time, for a good chunk of that time frame as Komurasaki. And all of that. So she gets this great setup there where she's like revealing that to him. And then Orochi, being the sniveling little pest that he is like, oh, no. I actually respected Oden. It was Kaido who did all the bad things. I really liked Oden. So he's like begging her to remove the mail. And he's being like that sniveling little cockroach that he is. And, going through all of that. And which is just funny. And he's like begging her to remove the nail, and he's just like, oh, we can run away together, and I'll, we can go through this, because he still thought that he's, he's like trying to, trick her, and Hiyori is just like, yeah, do you really think that you're gonna trick me? I know your tricks. I've played you like a fiddle the past however many years that I have been around you. And that's just additional funny bit. And so they're going through all of that. And he's like, my father kept his promise. He danced naked in the street for 5 years. And you guys had promised that you would leave when he did that, when he accomplished that mission. And you didn't. He kept his promise. You and Kaido broke it. And then you killed him, along with a bunch of other innocent people who tried to stand up to you. And you've caused nothing but pain for this country. And the thing is that while all of this is happening, there's also the Gear 5th battle for Luffy going on top of on Onigashima between Luffy and Kaido. Is like that's kind of going on at the same time. Because there's these two different sides of the battle. Because like Kaido is scheming to a degree, and all of that stuff. And he's not a good person by any stretch of the imagination. This version of Kaido, at the very least, is not a good person. And, he's the brawn in this regard. And then Orochi is kind of portrayed as the brains. To be fair, Orochi just kind of used what he learned from Higurashi and Senimaru. Higurashi for the most part. But what he learned from them. So there's that, there's like that representation there of like Hiyori is dealing with like the political side of what's going on here with like this usurper to the throne, Well, Luffy up on the roof is dealing with Kaido, the one who is kind of the power behind the throne, or the power in regards to why they've been able to stay in control for so long. So it's like those two opposing battles, or not opposing battles, but two counterparts of a battle going on there. Because when you look at Dressrosa, Doflamingo is both the mastermind behind everything that happens, and he's the power. He's the one who has the power to be able to do it. Same thing with like Crocodile, with what was happening in Alabasta and such like that. Or not quite the same as Hody Jones in Fishman Island, but like that same kind of concept. So, that battle is happening at the same time. And, Orochi is trying to trick Hiyori, trying to like butter her up and be like, oh no, 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 I thought Odin was a great samurai and everything. And that he should be respected, blah 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 blah. And Hiyori is just sitting there, still playing her shamisen, I believe, as all of this is happening. And is just like, yeah, no, I'm not falling for any of your BS. Which is just great. So, and she just explained, it was like, I lived without food and was dressed in rags. And I still defended my father's honor. And, like, I never saw you as Shogun. You were nothing but this pathetic madman who killed innocent people. At the very least, Kaido has the power to back up what he is able to threaten. Orochi is just sniveling and has people scared. And so what ends up happening is, so we kind of go through a lot of this. And at some point in time during this matter, a little piece of the Kanjuro's Kanzenbo has kind of, it's appeared, it's, burned its way through a lot of the island, and then it's kind of gotten taken care of at one point during the part of the battle with Big Mom, and Law, and the bombs and everything that were frozen by Yamato. That kind of got taken care of there. A little snippet, a little worm of the power has managed to make its way to Orochi. And is, Orochi's like, Kanjuro, destroy her. And the little bitty flame thing just kind of, and then just starts burning Orochi alive, which is just fun. And, Hiyori's just like, I have been planning this revenge for like 20 years essentially, and like have had, Denjiro helping and everything else like that. So it's like she's had that. And she does kind of flinch during this moment when like the Kanzenbo shows up, because she's not sure what it's going to do. And then it's just like, oh no, it just goes and attacks Orochi. Which, side note, I guess you could see as like whatever little bit of good part of Kanjuro was still there. Whatever bit of Kanjuro that truly saw the Scabbards and Odin and the others as his friends and as his family. Maybe that little bit of maybe that little bit of him is this little bit of the Kanzenbo just going, F you, Orochi, and then just burning him alive. Is possibly where you could see that land. Otherwise, it's just the power just went out of control and just decided to attack Orochi. Was the easier target. So, starts burning him alive. And at this point in time, Hiyori has like stood up and she's watching him and she's like, see that the dawn, seeing that the dawn will come, that this is, the darkness is getting, the dawn of the world, the new dawn of the world is coming. And your death is, kind of a part of that. And he's like begging her to save him again, the pathetic way that he is. And she's like, the Kozuki family will always keep its promises, is what she's saying. And what ends up happening is, Orochi, the nail manages to come loose. So Orochi is able to change into the Yamato no Orochi form and tries to attack Hiyori. And, like, we do kind of see her flinch a bit during this moment, but she's still fairly standing her ground during this battle, during this standoff. And this is, like, happening directly at the same time that Luffy is getting ready to punch out Kaido, if I remember correctly. So what ends up happening is Denjiro shows up and just slices off the last one of Orochi's heads, falls to the ground, and So we're seeing a bunch of that there. So that's just kind of fun. So Orochi has been decapitated. Hiyori is still kind of standing him down. Denjiro is standing off to the side after he's kind of like held her for a moment while she's kind of able to get herself a bit under control. And they go through a bunch of that. So we kind of get, and we don't see this next part until after technically the battle has ended, but we get like the little flashback when they're doing the Rakugo play and everything. So what ends up happening is Denjiro declares that Hiyori shouldn't be underestimating the Kurozumi family's anger. Um, so there's, a bunch of crap going on there. Attacks, Orochi is beheaded, hugs Hiyori, congratulates her on staying strong for all these years, which makes her cry. And as I said, like, Denjiro, like, he would never try to replace Oden in Hiyori's life. He never could. It's not his intention. His intention is to try to help her become the strong woman that Oden knew she could be. And he did. He helped her become that. May not have been in the exact same way that Oden wanted her to become this strong woman, but she became the strong, very independent, very brave woman who Oden would be exceedingly proud of. So the last bit that we get here is that for dealing with Orochi is still alive, but he's still burning to death, and he's had his last head cut off, so he has no more extra lives. He is dying. And Orochi is like, the Kurozumi family will curse all of Wano forever, as like he's trying to threaten them with another curse. And Hiyori's like approaches Orochi's burning body, and she does the whole, pulls out the fan and does the whole, Kurozumi was born to burn, which thankfully Oda has clarified does not mean all of the Kurozumi, just specifically means Orochi, as he dies by fire. Because, of course, Kurozumi means black coal, so it's, this reference to something burning. And as I have stated before, whether or not Tama has fully explained that she is also a member of the Kurozumi family, but had, she fought on their side, there's always that question there, so we'll see what ends up happening with that regard. So, Battle of Onigashima is finishing up. Onigashima has landed. Nekomamushi makes the announcement that Luffy beat Kaido and that Momonosuke prevented the island from falling. So all of that gets taken care of. Now it's time to go and announce to the citizens of Wano that Kaido is gone and Orochi is dead, and that Momonosuke has returned to claim his right as, his birthright as Shogun. So we have it that Momonosuke, Hiyori, and all the scabbards surviving scabbards, make their way to the flower capital. Where they have this great entrance where they have Hiyori and Denjiro as like the first two, and they're like, it's Kirishiro and it's Komurasaki. And she reveals that, no, I am not Komurasaki. I am, Kozuki, I am Kozuki Hiyori. And, we're here to announce the new Shogun of Wano, the rightful Shogun of Wano, Kozuki Momonosuke. And like we have the great bit where, they walk out and like Kinemon kind of points out to Hiyori and Denjiro, just like, how famous are you anyway? And there was like, will we still be recognized by the citizens? And they are. And like all of this is broadcast throughout the country to all the different regions and everything like that, so they can see what's going on. And Momonosuke arrives in human form, and he walks through, and it's just everybody is just crying and elated and cheering and all of this stuff. And Hiyori is just so happy to finally get to see her brother again. And we have the moment where they finally both hug and they're reunited. And that's just adorable, and I love that bit there. We cut to a week later where Hiyori shows up to Momonosuke, jump kicks him in the head, and it's just like, Zoro and Luffy are waking up. And he's just like, why do I keep letting this happen to me? And then they go in there like all happy that Zoro and Luffy are waking up, so they interact with them. And then Zoro makes the comment of like, why am I not dirty? I haven't bathed in a week, and Hiyori's like, oh, I gave you sponge baths, essentially, is what happens there. And Zoro's like, okay. Um, I have stated through and through that I am a Hiyori, or I don't really, I like the idea of Hiyori with Yamato, in all honesty, but like Zoro and Tashigi is like where I land on like who Zoro should end up with or somehow end up with her. Some people want Perona, and I'm like, okay, I could see that. And I can see people wanting him to end up with like Hiyori as well, but like, I think more Tashigi is his speed. But like I like the idea of like Hiyori and Yamato just to kind of like fix some of more of the bad blood between, Kaido's children and Odin's children. Not that there's much bad blood left there. So they get ready, and it's time to get ready for the celebration. So they all go into the bathhouse, and they all go into the bathhouses and everything. Like all the women are in one, all the men are in the other. And Hiyori is, of course, in the women's bathhouse, and they're all just talking and laughing and kind of getting ready to celebrate. And she's like sitting next to um, uh, Kiku, and they're just like talking about like old times and everything like that. And then it's time for the second fire festival, essentially, for the flower capital to celebrate that Wano is free from Orochi and Kaido. And of course, during this time frame, we have it that um, Hiyori ends up playing, the Moon Princess for the first time without her mask, and she's playing it with Brooke, which I love to like show that kind of two musicians playing together. And she gets to play it without the mask for the first time in 20 years because she's not playing it for Orochi. She is playing it in honor of her father during her brother's new reign, true reign that he should have had a long time ago, and her country is free. So she's just probably smiling the whole time. And a lot of the men are just like, oh no, I I got swindled by the princess. Oh, that's not good. Um, type of a thing. So they have like the huge festival. Momona Hiyori is not involved in any of the stuff that happens with trying to go and fight against Ryu Kogu. So she's not involved in any of that when he shows up. And, all of the scabbards and Momonosuke and the others, all they kind of return to the palace and everything. And via the conversation that Robin had with Tanguyama, who has revealed himself to be Sukiyake, what ends up happening is Sukiyake ends up revealing to Hiyori and Momonosuke that he is their grandfather, that he is Kozuki Sukiyake, and that he is still alive. And just both children are just overwhelmed with joy at this point in time. And they just run over, and like the three of them are hugging, and it's like this moment where it's just like they thought each other was like the only family they had left. And now they find out that their grandfather is alive. And all of this, so they like, it's the whole run to the grandfather and hug him, which, given the fact that I'm recording this the day after my own grandfather's funeral, has a bit of a, bit more heartfelt touches to it, that regard. So I love that like we get that for them. And it's just like, no, you're not completely alone. Although depending on if you want to count Moria, given what we've learned in the cover page series, we'll see how that goes. So they go through all of that, and they're just like so happy that they have another relative with them. And he's like apologizing to them for the fact that he wasn't able to help with anything with Odin and everything like that. It's like, don't apologize. It's just like, we're just happy to have you here. So it's just like that kind of nice family moment there. And of course, it's just funny that like all of the scabbards realized that it was him except for Kinemon. But they're like, yeah, we'll pretend that we didn't know it was you, type of thing. So, getting into the end of Wano here, the last little bit that ends up Wano. In the anime, we get like an extra episode or some extra clips where we have it that Hiyori and Toko, along with Zoro, end up at Yasuie's grave. Where Zoro is paying respect to him, and Toko is like pouring sake into his cup for them to all kind of toast him, and Hiyori and Zoro are kind of conversing during this time frame. And Hiyori is sad that Zoro is leaving, and she kind of talks to him about Enma, and states that And like Zoro states that he's impressed with Odin's mastery of the blade, because Zoro still has not mastered the blade. He's getting closer, but he's still getting a few more, got to work out a few more kinks. So a few days later, what ends up happening is the way that this part ends is that Hiyori and Toko are sitting and they're practicing their shamisen when Momonosuke rushes in and he's just like, "Do you know where the Straw Hats are?" And they're just like, "Oh yeah, they're leaving," and they're just sitting there. They've already said their goodbyes to us, and they're departing. In the morning, and they're just like sitting there practicing, and they're just like Momonosuke is like, "Wait a second, what? They say goodbye to you, but they didn't say goodbye to me." So he's just like all dashing off to go deal with that. And sometime, a little bit later that day or whatever, Hiyori and Toko make their way to the auditorium where they are doing, where the school teacher is like telling them the story of the raid on Onigashima. And of course, this is where we get the last bit where she does the big performance of, Kurozumi were born to burn when it comes to Orochi. So that's kind of how we end that out, which is, like a nice way to end out Wano. And of course, Wano is now under the protection of the Straw Hats. And the next time we see Hiyori is in Yamato's cover page story. And essentially, this is really more the first time that we've seen Hiyori and Yamato interact. They kind of have interacted already. I'm sure they talked a little bit during like the week when Luffy and Zoro were recovering, and like had some conversations there and had to do the whole explanation of, "So who are you?" "Oh, I'm Yamato. I'm Kaido's son, but I also adored your father. His logbook was actually my Bible. I gave it to your brother, and I actually helped him fight against my dad," type of a thing. And Hiyori's just probably like, "Okay, fine, whatever. Enough weird craps happened. I'm fine with this. You're on our side." "Yes." "Okay, we're good then." But Hiyori and Yamato are kind of becoming friends. So what ends up happening in the Pilgrimage one, in the Yamato cover page story, is that the one bit that we see of like Hiyori and Toko is them packing a lunch for Yamato to take on the pilgrimage around Wano. And that technically, I believe, was the last time that we saw Hiyori, because I do not believe that Hiyori appears when the message from Vegapunk is going out. Assumedly, she's told about it. And even once Yamato has returned to the Flower Capital, we did not see Hiyori at the shrine at the end of the cover page series. So it's possible, probably Hiyori was involved in the development of the shrine for those who passed because of Orochi and Kaido and such. She has probably been to the shrine. Exactly what else she's been doing, we're not sure. Wasn't really shown in the cover page series, hasn't really been shown since. We'll see what happens the next time she shows up. I would assume she is going to be somewhat of like an advisor for Momonosuke, just as like that role, because of the fact that she has been around, she's been watching Wano for the past 20 years, where Momonosuke hasn't, not because he couldn't, but you get the idea. And so she has like a lot of this idea of just like, these are the people you can trust, these are the people you can't trust, and giving him that type of advice. Same way that like the Scabbards and some of the others are going to be, advisors to Momonosuke. Hiyori might show up in the final battle. I really want there to be something involving music at some point in time in regards to one of the final battles, or something to do with music. And I would like the idea of like her and Brooke and some of the other musicians playing together. I would love the idea of course, if like Uto was real and like all of them playing and singing together would be pretty cool, as like something. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. That's what I have for this one. That should be the ending of Wano at the moment, for all of these characters and everything. And then I'm going to do a couple of just miscellaneous videos, and then I'll be getting into my cover page series. So that's what I have. I thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.